Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-host, Wilfred Riley. And our guest this week is Claston Bernard. He's an Olympian and the author of Outcast. Claston, welcome to the show.
Oh man, hey, finally, like Will says, finally. I've read so many books and seen so many quotes. Like, I'm telling you, he's famous. I'm like,
he means you,
I don't
Will.
know.
He means
Yeah.
Will, just you, not me.
I mean, I think we're all about equivalently famous. I don't know. Like, I'm not at that level where someone could see you in like an airport or something and freak out.
But
Every
you
now and then
are
I'll
the
get
Twitter
recognized.
star here. On Twitter, you're a big name.
Yeah, my Twitter's just like me doing one of these joints though. Like, I don't think if you saw me in public, you wouldn't recognize me, which
Right,
is ideal.
that's true. The
Actually.
face. That's true. That's true.
You never know.
Well,
I'm sorry.
he said you never know.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're like a writer or an athlete or something, like you want to be famous enough to make money, but you don't really want to be seen in public and accosted by lunatics.
Right. You
So
never know
like,
if
a
they're
lot
going
of
to
my
like you or
writing is
not.
like- What's up?
I said that's right because you never know if they're going to like you or not.
Well, my writing's all either pretty right wing or kind of pro black, and it's all controversial. If you follow one of my Twitter threads, there are like 100 comments from different guys like talking shit. So I mean, like, I don't really want to argue for 3 hours every day if I'm in a bar or something. So hopefully I'll be inconspicuous for a little bit longer. You know?
Exactly.
Hey, Charles, wear a MAGA hat, and you might see Charles Barkley coming to you. I mean,
Oh yeah, I heard about that. So I think we may have some time because I brought you on for a specific topic, but there's a lot of crazy going on, so we might want to cover that if we get to it. But we had some scheduling issues, so you didn't technically fall into Black History, but we're pro-Black, so every day is Black History Month around here.
For real.
So I wanted to talk to you about because I said Olympian, but I didn't say who you ran for. That's right. So as an immigrant, you went to college here. You ran under the Jamaican flag, but you ran for Congress here, right? And you're a proud American. I see the little flag back there, and it ain't Jamaican. So I thought about you because I was thinking how I find it interesting, and you can tell me what your lived experience is like, that there's a big move, especially at the rise of ADOS and the rise of the Freedmen movement, to delineate between, immigrants and Blacks of, American descent who's been here for multiple generations, which, there's some of that I agree with. We make it to that. But I find it interesting that Black immigrants tend to be treated differently, but they're treated differently based on their politics. So correct me if I'm wrong, Claston, that if you are, you can either be first generation American where your parents are immigrants, but you were born here, or actual immigrants.
Mhm.
But if you agree with the left on a lot of issues, they talk about you like you're a Black person, right? Like you're ADOS, Chimamanda, the Nigerian poet. I can name several other people. I'm sure the two of you can think of people that fall. Joy Reid falls in that category, some others. But if you're that same lineage, but you're conservative, you go to Twitter, you white folks who are watching it, and I tell this to my friends and they don't believe me until they go find it. Look up Tether, right? And Tether and Black people, and you see what you find. You're not treated in the same light. So tell me if you experienced that and what I'm saying is true, and if so, what your thoughts on that are.
well, you know me well enough, and I think you hit the.
I can't interview like you as if I talk to you all the time. I gotta act like I've never met you before.
Well, here's the deal. I'll paraphrase it. Like you said, the American flag is right here, and the beauty about being an American, it's an idea that was brought to life with the Declaration of Independence, where all men are created equal. We can talk about all the other stuff that was happening at that time, or we can just. But the premise was all men are created equal. It didn't say at a certain time or anything. It just said all men are created equal, endowed by God with certain unalienable rights. So I like to start with that paraphrase. Now, fast forward, I'm here. I'm an immigrant. I'm at LSU. I'm graduating. Left LSU. I'm talking to people. People are assuming, hey, you're supposed to be Democrat. And they used to tell me, listen, um, you need to vote for the Democrats. They'll take care of you. And then they'll say, don't trust the Republicans, especially when I first got here. And I'm like, man, I don't really know who a Republican and Democrat. No, I don't know the difference. I knew enough about American history, but I didn't, in terms of who was what and who fit what bill, unless they had some kind of markings on their face or something, I couldn't tell. So it was assumed to be Democrat. So I fell into that rank where I watched ton loads of MSNBC and CNN. I watch that daily, all the time. But there was something that didn't make sense. A lot of times when I, studied the civil rights movement in college, I studied a lot of the Black history. I hate saying African American history, and I'm gonna throw this in there. My ancestors got let off at the Little House in the Caribbean. You know,
I don't know, unless you're doing sugar cane. I don't even know if you want to call that the Little House, but okay.
So they ate us, and some of these people who are claiming this status, they got sent. Some of them got sent here, but the reality is there was a lot of intermingling. There were people who were seasoned in Jamaica and then sent to America. There were different things that was going on. They were seasoned in Barbados. Will can correct the record for that. But there was always a lot of intermingling. You can look at Alexander Hamilton. He was from Antigua or one of those countries. So there was always a lot of movement between the continent of America and the Americas or the Caribbean. Right. So, when you make that argument, right away you're making a statement as if you don't know if some of your ancestors got left in the Caribbean, whether it was Jamaica, and even Cuba, maybe, and some got sent here because that was part of the reality of what slavery was. So culturally, Jamaica was British country. It was Great Britain, a part of the Great Britain Empire, just like America. America got their independence in 1776. Jamaica got their independence in 1962. So there are different things, but there's always the baseline of who we are is coming from the same root. Culturally, there's so much intermingling, so much intermixing. And when I came here, and like I was saying, I watch a lot of CNN, I watch a lot of MSNBC, and they're trying to tell you what it is supposed to be Black. And I'm like, what the heck is that? I didn't grow up in Jamaica being cognizant that my color made me, and in fact, made me somewhere inferior, superior. And in fact, when they did, one of the worst thing I heard growing up was, the Black man is the biggest, strongest, fastest. And then in 1998, I'm in the World Junior Championships. It's like the World Junior Olympics of, junior athletes. And I'm in France competing. And I'm seeing these Australian, I'm seeing these Eastern European, I'm seeing these European guys, I'm seeing these Japanese guys. And I'm like, if I want to be as good as them, I have to be better. I have to work hard. I have to become more technically sound. That's how you compete with these guys. None of this is given. So it was when I kept seeing the indoctrination from the American news media. This is how it is supposed to be Black, like you're saying. If you're a Joy Reid, or if you're a Kamala or Kamala, whichever way you want to pronounce that, you're welcomed into the flock, and you can espouse a certain hate white people, and you can marry white people, you can screw white people. Excuse my language. You can do whatever you want with white people. It's an acceptable norm. But if you're a Justice Clarence Thomas, or if you're someone else like myself or you guys, then all of a sudden you're supposed to be burned at the stake, or you're supposed to be an outcast. And that is the reason why I wrote my book Outcast, because again, back to what I was saying in college, when I studied the history, what CNN and MSNBC wasn't saying didn't make sense. Because when I read about Frederick Douglass, I saw a conservative. I saw a man who understood and loved the American Constitution. When you talked about Booker T. Washington, I saw the same thing. And you can go through a litany of guys, and you can look at the guys who were the first representative in Congress that were former slaves. I was like, they don't hold these views, and I was constantly trying to reconcile that. And Obama made it crystal clear for me, because there were things that I could not identify with Obama with. Because one, I learned, go ahead. I can come
Oh,
back to that.
I didn't want to interrupt you. I was just got to get a break and I got to get the get Will on stage here. So if you wanted to finish your statement, you can go ahead about Obama because he falls in that category. So I'm gonna let you finish that and then I'll go to Will. What were you gonna say about what did Obama make crystal clear for you?
Well, for me, as a black man, I've always understood when you use that family is important, that God is important. Those are bedrock of society. It was what the slaves held on to. It was the idea of family that kept slaves together throughout the industry and the history of slavery. And Obama pretty much was saying that's no longer irrelevant. It's about identity politics, whether you fall into the extreme LGBTQ or this immigrant group or whatever group it's about identity. It's no longer the all men are created equal with certain unalienable rights, and we're going to move forward to create a country that all men are all men, meaning men and women, are treated with dignity and respect.
Will, he said a lot there, but toward the end, he also threw in some other people I forgot about because there's so many that fall in that category. So I want your thoughts on how they're treated differently. But interestingly enough, he mentioned Kamala and Obama, and they're interesting because Obama's was black the whole time. Black people act like, yeah, it was one of our own. Then after he left office and they didn't really get what they want, now you're starting to hear people say, well, he wasn't black anyway. He didn't have our interests. He cared more about them than us because he was an immigrant. So now he doesn't count. And then Kamala's weird in reverse. Kamala wasn't black when she was running for president. That's why she polled at 0. But that once Joe Biden picked her, she became black. And so now she's a weird one that sometimes they count her and sometimes they call her Indian American. So what are your thoughts on how they're looked at when they're immigrants?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I like it when the guests talk and say something. I mean, so that's, I mean, that was a good intro. I only prepped like 5, 6 questions. I mean, if someone doesn't know what they're
That's
talking about,
perfect
this
because
can
he's
get,
going to talk.
yeah, no, but I mean, it can get tiring. I mean, we've had some of the guests, just people we knew personally, or like some people on the left side of the fence. I mean, anywho, but no, I mean, I agree. Like, if I were thinking about this, like, I mean, we've had Razib Khan, the geneticist, on the show, and I'm not a racist or anything of that nature, but like, there obviously is such a thing as being black. You're more than 50% or whatever Bantu African descent. So like you can say what a black person is, I think, in a coherent way. It's when you start talking about being American or being an islander or something like that that these ideas get a lot more complicated. And yeah, I think all races do this. Like I was talking with one of my friends once, like the guy I've known since high school, a guy named Marcus, and he was like, "Well, you're interracial." But like he talked some shit about me, but then he was like, "But you're a pretty cool guy." So like black guys and white guys are both mostly like, yeah, okay, you're fine. You could be one of us. But it would really suck to be interracial and very awkward or to be convicted of a crime. And we were kind of just telling jokes, but there's an element of truth to that. Like as people feel less affectionate towards you or less associated with you, they make moves to cut you out of the group. And if you're closer to the margins of the group, that can become easier to do. So with black immigrants, it's not really a question of is someone from Lagos, Nigeria, or someone from Kenya, are they black? Of course. The question is, are they an American? Are they one of us? And that's when you get into that kind of Tariq Nasheed, Ados commentary. Like you haven't had the experience of coming from West Africa as a slave and living in the South and picking up elements of redneck culture. You don't know jazz and hip hop. And at this point, a lot of foreign migrants get a little annoyed, like, yeah, no, but I'm black and I'm employed and I live here too. Like, enough of this. So it's a debate that's been going on for a while. I think kind of I don't want to like go on for a long period of time, but I think this ties into the idea of politically black. That's a simple way to think of it. Like Nicole Hannah Jones once explicitly said this on Twitter and got so shredded that she took her point down. And like whites, black immigrants, so on, a lot of people were jumping in. But what she said is it's not enough that you're, more than 50% black genetically. We all know there's a separate thing, being black politically, being a real black person. And if you don't know what that is, I'm not even going to explain it to you. And I've asked my students about this, and they've attributed things to it, like feeling a sense of oppression, feeling tied into American, especially Black American pop culture, certain other things like their churches, like the AME church that are hundreds of years old that are all Black, athletics. I mean, and generally when people say someone's very Black, especially about someone who say Hispanic, that's what they're referring to. They're referring to that culture combined with a certain political viewpoint. They're not just saying, "Oh, his ancestors came from Africa." And this combination, this juxtaposition can get really funny because a lot of people who have no experience with American oppression or anything like this are very politically black. Like, I got annoyed enough, last thing for me, but I got annoyed enough by Joy Reid's nonsense online to actually look up her background. And I mean, but like her dad is from Cameroon.
Right.
You know, her mom, he's one of the biggest landowners in the country, apparently. He's like a chief. Her mom is one of the country's better known nutritionists. They met in grad school at the University of Iowa, which is probably the most white, quote unquote, thing I can imagine anyone doing. But she's just started. And I mean, like, there's also that darker background. Like, if you're a Cameroonian chief from that portion of the coast, like, how'd your family get their money? You know, like, you know, Wakanda wasn't real. Like, what were they actually doing? What are they loading on them boats? What happened to their enemies? But so if you never ever say, well, my family has some trouble in its history, and you consistently vote for the Democrats, and you say the right woke stuff, even if you are the daughter of an African king, you can do this oppressed routine. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. It's not just, I mean, we talk about immigrants, and you made some good points, but a lot of times some of those people do feel like their ties, especially now with American culture is so strong and so broad, and you get it everywhere. They still kind of tap into a lot of those things that are considered Black culture, and it still doesn't matter, right? But beyond the immigrant thing, it's also the, what was it recently? I'm sure you both just saw it, where the Black elected Republicans, the congressman, and Tim Scott took a picture, and they were all standing together, and somebody, captioned it with, "This is the Democrats, nightmare," or something of that sort.
Oh yeah,
And all the comments were about, yeah, and they all date white women. And I'm like, I would pass out, I need a gallon of water to stay, hydrated if I tried to read a list of all the pro-Black Black leftists who are in relationships with white people. It's endless. It's like the loudest ones. If they're loud, they're either mixed or they're married to a white guy. It's like a woman. That's just what it is.
Colonized in the sheets. Yeah, it's like a meme because it's so common. Like, and it's every single one. It's like Ilhan Omar, AOC, even outside Black communities. Like, I think Rashida Tlaib, you just go down the list of them. Don Lemon. Don Lemon's gay and is in a relationship with a white guy.
Right.
I mean, there's
Jonathan
I have no
Capehart,
hate for that, but it's just
Jordan Peele.
It's kind
Let's
of
just
funny.
spend some hours on it, right? Kamala.
Yeah, but like, I think Joy Reid, like, it's kind of funny to go through all this, like, the white man screwing me, and literally be in a sexual relationship with a powerful white dude. And you kind of it gets almost Freudian. Like, right. What's the connection between, like, dating a dominant white businessman, talking constantly about white people, and yourself being from the upper class? Like, there's something going on in the head there. I'm not sure everything's together there.
And the other thing that's weird too is, so I made a comment about it, and someone replied saying, "Yeah, I know a lot of the people you mentioned, they date white women too, but the difference is they don't only date white women. That I'm sure if you go to their past, at some point they've also dated Black women. So who besides the people they're with now, who Wesley Hunt and Burgess Owens. Burgess is 70, so who he was dating in the 70s. Is that what you're telling me? You know every woman he dated, and you can certify that they're all white? Is that what you're saying? It's insane. It's like the hurdles they will jump through to make that point. It just kind of fascinates me.
It's also like one very quick comment. People, and this is true, I think, for all races, all social classes, but people like love to seize on the shit that they're used to thinking about you. Like when white guys do the "we was kangs," if you say anything pro-Black, it's like, it's actually not what I'm saying. Like, these are just the crime figures. But it's like people have their memes ready to go. Like the "have you dated white people" thing. Like, my current partner, Jane, my fiance, actually is white. Or it's just like Irish and a quarter native, but like white in American terms. And that's actually the first white person I've dated in a while. But like every time someone sees a picture of us together, it's always like, "Oh, I knew you were one of them type of brothers." And it's like, come on. Like, first of all, I'm not exactly, Shaka Zulu myself. And secondarily, that's the first time that's happened in a long time. It's like an Irish person from Illinois. Like, I didn't go like seeking out Southern belles. So but people assume that's the thing. If you're a Black conservative guy, you're going to be, you'll have made a lot of money, but your hair looks raggedy. Your wife will be white. You're just like bam, 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 all the stereotypes. And sometimes they're true. Usually they're not.
But classic. One thing, if you want to add something, that's fine. But I was going to ask you something. Did you want to say something first?
Well, one of the hypocrisies, especially the people on the left, and I look at it from that theological point where you are dating someone who is white or black, whatever, your preferences are, and you spew the most garbage hatred, and you're raising sometimes a family. So now you're telling your kids you need to choose side. Who are you going to be? Are you going to be more likely you have to be pro-black because you can't be pro-white, because
Right.
if you're pro-white, you're a bigot and you'll be burned at the stake.
Right.
This is the corrosive nature of all of that. And a lot of times I'm there and I'm just like, make it make sense to me that you're going there, so that's why, just listening to all of that, hey, to each his own.
Right. And then I thought of you because Will made a point at the end when he talked about the white people and the assumptions of what the thing they most think about you. And he's like, he made the joke about we was kings. But that made me think. So they talk about all this race relation. They talk about the immigrant being different because you don't have that struggle. And Will mentioned that as one of the things. But of course, to be honest, they're right when they say, as an immigrant, you don't know, you haven't lived the experience of slavery and Jim Crow in America, coming from whatever country you came from. And technically that's true. Of course, they're leaving out the fact that they haven't lived the experience either. But we're not supposed to comment about that. But what they're also leaving out, though, is what you have done, depending on the country. But in your case, you could say that Nigeria, others, you have come from a country that is majority Black. So, with that being the case, are they, I mean, is there things that insights you can give them about human nature because you were able to grow up? Now, they may say it was colonization and being under the British rule, but the fact that, 50, 60 years ago, but in the time you were growing up, it was a Black country, majority Black country that was run by Black people, right? So you have, how are the experience the same or different once you take the strife of white Black out of your daily life? So I'm assuming Jamaica was as Will would say, was Wakanda, and everything was perfect because the evil white man was out of the way on a daily basis.
Well, the minute they got the country turned over to them, it started going up. And then the politics of communism got there, and it's where it is right now. So that's what autonomy does. You go and you actually embrace the evil white man, Karl Marx, the bigot, and you introduce his politics into the culture of Jamaica. Now, it's the same thing like we can look at even with Obama. You got Obama and look where America is. So what I've learned to do in Jamaica was to judge people based on the way that they treat me. And that was it. If you're an asshole, you're an asshole. If you're a good person, you're a good person. I have learned to just judge people based on how they're treating us. And that's why you'll find a lot of Jamaican and other immigrants, they'll have great relationship with people from all walks of life, because when they're coming, especially from a majority country with people that look like themselves, they know the inherent nature of people it's not boiled down to your melanin or your carotene content, but what's in your heart. That's the key to it. And so much of that, sometimes they stay silent on it because they don't want to ruffle any feathers. But for me, in America, I'm going to judge you, either you're an asshole or you're not an asshole. That's just it.
Isn't one of the advantages, now I don't have that exact experience, but I'm pretty close, because you talk about chocolate cities. I grew up in one of the darkest, right? So what I found for me is I do still find it odd. I still talk to my friends and I wonder why, and none of them are like crazy leftists, but why they didn't see things the same way I did. I guess people are just different. But what I notice is it's not just the good that you see in people. I think the bad is what helps, and being able to see both. And what I mean by that is I grew up in Gary, Indiana. And I mean, you can go all day and not see a white person, right? Occasional teacher who's close to retirement that didn't leave, an old senior down the street. But I mean, all day. And people ask me what I remember, what my childhood was like and what I remembered about it. And what stood out to me was that every criminal and stereotypical negative element that we talk about in American and in the Black community, I saw that, right? I saw people getting locked up. I saw drugs. I saw all that kind of stuff. And all of the people who were doing the bad things were Black. The difference is I also had, teachers, the city council, the person who ran the school district, the chief of police, the mayor, and everybody, and every lawyer I saw was also Black. I saw Black doctors all the time, every day. So it was not, I didn't just get the bad without seeing the good. I wasn't shocked when I saw an educated black person, but then I didn't go around thinking that every black this town is all black, so there's no way anybody's going to rob me, right? So I feel like, so I don't know if it's the same in Jamaica, but I feel like you get a healthy dose of both. So it kind of sets your, it kind of tunes the compass, and it kind of makes sure that it forces you to look at people like that. You have to, judge. There's enough crime and enough good that you still have to have your head on the swivel, as they say. You still have to, trust but verify. You have to do all those things. You have to say, I'm not going to assume because that black man is walking down the street that he's a criminal, but I also don't instantly think a woman is a racist when she clutches a purse, because the woman clutching a purse is also black. So does that also play a part in negating when you hear these stories about, I know there's racism? Why? Because somebody got out of the elevator when I got on.
Hatred exists. How it plays itself out is another thing. I go back to Jamaica, and I'm going to use this paraphrase. Jim Crow was evil, to the point, evil. But what Black America was able to do, the autonomy that developed, the success that came out during the period of Jim Crow, starting, you want to go say 1880s into the 1950s. The Black America that I read about and studied in history was one where they control the environment, irrespective of what was going on. They had their lawyers, they had their doctors, they were educated, they spoke well, they dressed nicely, they had manners. They were a group of people moving upwardly. And now in Jamaica, I saw that also. But just like you said, there were things that I saw. There were people who looked at me. I'm not Wilfred in terms of color, but people just automatically thought that I got an advantage in school, even though my siblings who are darker were serious intellectuals. But somehow, because I was a little lighter and my brother was a little lighter, somehow we got favoritism. So one of the things that I don't like to ascribe to is when someone is telling me about racism or using that, because it technically we want race, but bigotry exists. Hatred exists. But I watched that played out. I watched people, I was in fights sometimes daily because someone thought I got an advantage. I had to learn to fight. I had to learn to defend myself. In Jamaica, sometimes I was in rock fights. I'm talking serious rocks, people getting their head bust, running from each other. Probably that's why I'm as fast as I am. I could run,
Outrunning the rocks. You're on mute, Will.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. If you're honest about fighting, you also learn how to run. Like if you're a decent athlete, you see three guys coming, it's not going to be any type of hands up situation. You're going to move as rapidly as possible. But yeah, no.
Right. That's funny.
You best believe that you need to know when to fight, what battles to fight. You don't get stupid. You get yourself knocked out. So for me, I saw the lawyers, I saw the pilots, because Jamaica was a big thing growing up. I saw all of that. But
you mean black pilots? Don't get Will started.
Actually, when people were doing all this stuff, I assume both of you guys saw this online, right? Like which races worst pilots.
That's why I called you.
We're gonna hire black pilots and we're all gonna die. Actually, like when people were saying all this about DEI, like I don't approve of extreme affirmative action and so on. But I mean, like I've traveled a lot as a business person, as a writer, and I mean, I actually just posted online, like all the airlines in the Arab world and in Ethiopia, Nigeria, Jamaica, they seem to be Latin America. They seem to be able to land the plane. Like they have a lot of computers on these planes. Like there's not going to suddenly be some epidemic of air disasters. And again, this was an obvious point that people were just very angry about. So I don't know. People often want to feel the urge to be part of a team, even if the thing they're saying is stupid and kind of racist. And there's not much justification for that. And I actually will say, like, in terms of what both of you gentlemen said when you're talking about growing up in black areas, if you do that, it's impossible to believe that something like racism, violence, anything like that is a white trait. For me, it was, and I'm not even making fun of like blacks versus like whites in Chicago. Like they both have a lengthy criminal history that's been written about. But I mean, it's very difficult if you grow up in those sort of urban areas around a mix of people. Like where I went to high school was the east side of Aurora, Illinois. It's right outside of Chicago. It's Illinois' second largest city. And at that time, it was maybe a third black, like tough white guys, like people from like Bosnia and Hispanics. And everyone got along often, but there was also a fair amount of fighting. People would sort of date one another's sisters and cousins, would cause the usual tensions. And it was just the same thing. You'd meet a white guy or a black guy. This might be a little different in a jail or something like this. But normally the first question wasn't what's his race, it's what kind of a guy is this? Are we on the team together? Is he still enrolled in the school? Where does he live in the community? Like there are questions you'd use to establish that. Whereas I think if you came from an all-white setting, for example, or an all-black setting, but with no class diversity or something like that, the immediate assumption would be, I'm around different people now. They must be weird. They must be strange. No, they're the same sons of bitches. That's the thing. Like the great liberal illusion is that other people are brilliant and wise and they have something to teach you. Not that individuals don't, but that's why you'll see people sitting on a bucket in some rainforest listening to wisdom from the elders and assuming their life will change dramatically. And it's all stuff like treat your husband well. The conservative weakness is the reverse. It's the idea that people different from you are stupid and evil. And you see this across societies where the term for foreigner in China and a number of other countries means like barbarian dog. In reality, foreigners aren't any better or worse than your own people. They're just people. They vary as individuals, as all human beings tend to.
Right. And so classic, to that point, you have another example. You talked about the light skin and dark skin difference or whatever. To put a fine point on it, earlier you alluded to the fact that we know each other and we talk. So I already know this, but talk about the school experience, right? So you're in Jamaica. He said that he said a really important point that, I want to make sure people get. He said, if you were in a group where they're all black, but there's no class distinction, you may think XYZ. But once you throw that in the class differences or some other difference in the mix, you may all look the same, but the group doesn't see everybody at the same. So talk about, the differences in class and the way people treated you and different people in school.
To that point, there was an illusion. Even if to work at the bank, you had to have a certain color. So you had to be high color or whatever. That was, one of the things that they talked about in Jamaica. Or so that created the illusion for someone like me or from my family background to be targets of people who are darker than I am.
Right.
And
so they assume you think that because other people think it.
Yes. And somehow we are getting an advantage. I've met people here in America who have, they'll hear me talk and they'll see the way that I carry myself. And the first assumption is that you're from the upper class in Jamaica. And no, there was a standard that was expected in Jamaica. And like you talk about in the school system, Jamaica was a merit-based system. It's a merit-based system that they use in England and the African countries and the Caribbean countries. If you were smart, you get to go to the good schools if your parents could afford it. That was the only thing. If your parents could afford it, you go. But I will say this: like the high school I got into it's the only all-boys school still in the Caribbean, and in that school, there's some socioeconomic disadvantage or different things, because when I went there, it was the first time I saw a computer. I was 12 years old. First time I saw certain things, but they had a vast library and I love to read. And, but I was around guys who were traveling for their holidays to come to America, to come to Canada, to go to Germany. I was meeting people from all walks of life. And what I had to do was to use the library to broaden my horizon, to be able to even sometimes the conversations they were having, I'm like, frankly, I don't know what that is. I've never been on a plane, I've never been here, and that was the thing. So, and there you find there's a different group of people. There are intellectuals, or people who already came with a little package that believe that you should not be able to rise above them. Doesn't matter how they look. You right away, you are put into a caste system. Even today, if you break out of that caste, you're treated the way Democrats, black Democrats, treat conservative Republicans. And that's the tragedy. And this, so it's a stratified society in a lot of ways. And it's funny, you will see guys from India descent or Pakistani, because Jamaica has a strong Indian settlement. They're Chinese.
Yeah.
The Chinese, not recent Chinese. These people have been there hundreds of years now in Jamaica. And when you see us, we'll be there. We'll be playing. We'll be talking and lollygagging, doing whatever we're doing, and we're enjoying. We don't ever look at the actual color or the ethnicity of who we are. We didn't play into that. And that was the thing. That was the fun part for me in high school, was getting to meet people who didn't look like me, but realizing we were the same culturally in that way. And in whether it was religiously or other things, we had more in common in terms of humanity. We knew what was wrong and right was. We knew certain things. And when I look back at America, and this is the thing, I'll call me, what's the term I would like to use? I have an idea about America because I read so many books about America. I love Nat King Cole. I enjoy Nat King Cole. But for the longest while, man, I didn't know what Nat King Cole looked like. I didn't even know what he looked like. I didn't know, some of these people, what they look like, because we only had a battery power radio and you could only listen to the radio for so long, a day. And I just enjoy the music, but they have a broad, broad broad variety of music that you would listen to, and if you like it, you like it. So I started having this idea of America. So one of the shock for me was coming back to the CNN and MSNBC, was they're telling you this is what it means to be American, and that shock your soul, that shock your spirit, because that's not what I grew up in another country knowing and learning about America. So, like it says in Jamaica, their divisions are manufactured. Their identity politics manifesting itself among people that look like each other, but playing out vast differently. And if you look at the Bob Marley movie, no, they didn't want to say it, but it was communism versus capitalism. That was the tension, and it was black people killing people like dogs.
Man, you just took away my joke. I was going to end the interview by asking you how the movie was, and to say, is that racist? That I just assume you saw the movie, but you. But now, but Will, do you think that that's part of the reason why you cite stats all the time about Nigerians, Jamaicans, and other immigrants being, having a household income higher than that of whites? Is some of that, I mean, a lot of it is just a general immigrant thing because you come in with a different mindset, but that they look like. But I mean, I guess it goes back to the thing they say, well, you don't have our struggles and you don't have this experience. But they didn't have the experience either. But the difference is the mindset. They don't have the mindset that I can't do this because of my skin color. I'm not going to be allowed to do this because I'm black. Well, some people put that on themselves. I mean, we recently spoke to a very accomplished, a woman who said that she was oppressed, right? I asked her, I said, but are you oppressed? Not black. And she's like, yes, I'm oppressed. I was like, but you went to Columbia and Harvard, still oppressed. So if you believe that, right, then that kind of dictates how you move around in certain settings. So if a guy comes here from Jamaica, looks black, but he doesn't believe that, doesn't that kind of inoculate him from some of that? You're on mute.
Okay, my bad. Okay, so yes, I think it does to a pretty significant extent. And that's actually a very important point that you just brought up there, because like the defining element of being politically black in American liberal terms is feeling victimized and helpless. And it's really weird to think of it in that sense, but that's what most politically radical black people mean when they say, like, I'm black, I'm woke, I understand. It's like the worst version of the right wing guys talking about being red pilled, but even crazier. It's like, what I understand is that all differences between groups have to be due to racism. And there are a lot of differences between blacks and whites. Some of them were underperforming murder rate. Some of them were performing superbly, athletics. So there must be this incredible force throughout all of society. This can't have anything to do with culture, genetics, history, luck. Like, I mean, more black people live in the South where incomes are 2/3 as high. A lot of times it's pretty basic, but it can't be any of that. It has to be this force out there. It's like the old philosophers talking about phlogiston. And yeah, I think that has an enormous effect. So, I mean, like, I have immigrant buddies in the same way that I assume both of you guys do, coming from large cities, living different places in the USA. And I mean, a lot of their dads, basically, usually dad instead of mom, did something like come to the USA and start a cab company with like one cab, or anything along those lines. Like for some of the Latino guys, you had a fruit stand and you ended up renting out the front of a small business. And now you have a well-regarded fruit store and you have all this exotic stuff in there. And it's your family business and your sons work in the store. And I very rarely see Black Americans, or for that matter, Appalachian Americans, which is interesting because I live in a poor white area of the country. I live in Kentucky, do the same thing. And if you ask them why not, you often hear something like, they ain't gonna let no brother/hillbilly do that. They don't allow that. That ain't the way things work. And I think the guy who just got off the boat is very often willing to say, well, that is the way things work back in Lagos. And there's corruption there, there's racism there, but there also obviously are 70-story buildings now. And I see 110-story buildings here in America. So I assume things work the same way. And yeah, that's an incredible gift. Just the basic ability to go out and hustle for yourself, make money, feel confident in yourself. And you could really take this into so many arenas. Like, you guys are both familiar with the incel movement, right?
Yep.
It's all these guys that just sort of aren't getting laid. I'm not going to make it sound like there's any deep philosophy underlying it, but every time I hear them talk, it's always sort of like, how am I supposed to go out and compete with Chad or Tyrone or whatever their stereotype is? And how are women going to want me? And it's again the same kind of defeatism. It's any defeatist philosophy is based on there being a them out there.
Right.
It's not just women can say yes or no, and then you brush it off and move to the next one. There's some structure in society that privileges some men over other men, and you've fallen in the loser class, and you can never get out. A lot of Black people think this way. I mean, I don't view myself as any great historic beauty, even if I'm funny and I'm not poor. I've never had any trouble dating. And I just look around at ordinary men, and I see pretty much the same thing. Just guys at the gym getting ready to put their jacket on, getting ready to go out with their wife after work. So there's reality where what you see is pretty obviously reality. Work hard, you make money. And then there's the vision. It's not. It's complex. It's more deep than that. It's all these pseudo-religious ideas. That's why I'm not the most spiritual guy, but like karma is like this, fate is like this. And people are applying that to stuff like race and religion.
Well,
I
let
could've
me
gone
ask you
for
this
longer.
though.
That's the
No,
point.
I like that, but see, here's the thing that bothers me, and you get rightfully sometimes give me a hard time about giving people their argument, right?
Okay.
But I like to say, because I know that if I can get them to think it through, it still exposes that what they're doing and what they're saying makes no sense. And what bothers me about it is, let's assume that they're right. Like, I'm going to give them their argument, and there is the them out there stopping everybody from doing, making it really difficult to do X, Y, Z. But like the woman I was talking about, we interviewed before, it's different in the sense that you gave an example of the brother in the poor urban setting, your white brothers in Appalachia, right? But their world is small, right? That's all they know. But here we're talking about people who are learned, who read, who know history, who teach, who've been around the world, who have this, who are economically more advantaged and able to do these things, right? And yet they believe that whatever the case may be, there's a them out there, but their solution is always that the them has to change. So it's never we should do anything, right? There's never the white man doesn't want me to read a book. So I started this group where I take Black men to the library to get books, right? No, it's the white man doesn't want us to read books. So I decided to come up with an idea to make the white man want us to have books. So it's always to change them, never to fix it, even so we can debate. You and I think that there's no them out there, but even if there's a them, why are you leaning into the them? Right? That's what I don't understand.
Meaning, when you don't have purpose and meaning, you look where you can fit in. And then that's the reality of, Wilfred said something in Jamaica. There are people who would just tell you can't make it. You can't, just like that. You can't do it. It'll never happen. You can't go anywhere. Even when I said I wanted to become a decathlete, Jamaicans are known as sprinters. They've never made it as decathlete. Well, guess what? I'm the first one that made it to the Olympics. You know what? Because I know I could do it. But the cool runnings, this is one of the things that captures, this is what white liberals are looking for what they see in third world countries. They want to be the wealthy class protected by their guns and gated communities, and everybody else are the serfs that work for them. And that's what they want to create, because coming from countries like Jamaica, where you see sometimes that you have wealth, extreme wealth, and then you have maybe a little bit of middle class now, because I think things are improving, but then extreme poverty. And the mentality there is sometimes, to keep people down. So what better way to do it than to say, you know what, you can't make it, even though we have made it. We live in, Manhattan, in the wealthiest areas of Manhattan or upstate New York, but you can't. And this is the thing that's the sinister part of all of this, because now what they're trying to sell, the America they're trying to sell, is not the America that I saw, the guys who decided that they wanted to do cool runnings. They just were like, man, listen, hey, we're in Jamaica, but we're going to go to the Olympics and do bobsled. And you're like, how do you do that? There's no ice, there's no snow. You don't know what cold weather is, because America inspires others to want to do best. So when these guys are jumping off the boats, and even these people jumping over the borders illegal, they know inherently that you can do that in this country. This is what makes the liberal message so corrosive and destructive, because now they want them here, but they don't want them thinking like that. So now they're exporting something that's very un-American, coming from American, but it's not what who America was constructed to be.
Well, what you said there is actually really interesting as a political scientist, because it's like a mappable argument. It's actually a hypothesis where you're saying that certain groups of people, like white liberals that come from that European Marxist tradition. So I might also throw in, like, haciendado types, wealthy Latino guys in the Southwest, where they who support bringing in a lot of immigrants at a pretty high level. Those people aren't envisioning a society where they say you can't make it to their kids. They're envisioning a society where they are the elite and they live in protected communities. This is what you see. I mean, we've all been in the developing world. This is what you see in, say, Brazil. Even when I was in, like, Costa Rica and Nicaragua, like those type of countries, Costa Rica is very nice, but it's the same sort of thing. Like a rich man's house has a wall around it that's 10 feet tall with broken seashells cemented into the top and dogs inside the fence and so on. And he lives a great life, but that's because there's this whole support staff. You have actual servants. People still use old terms like my men. So a lot of the people that really want this model in the USA are people who at some subconscious level have to know they would benefit from it. And there's not really that much worry, I think, about the people who would suffer. And that's something a lot of people don't seem to process, especially in the case of poor whites. Like, it's just obvious that if you let in 50 million Hispanic immigrants over 20 years, mostly hardworking, funny, tough guys, but they're going to be going to cities full of a lot of white and black, hardworking, funny, tough guys. There's going to be constant clashing. Crime's going to increase for a generation. I saw this in East Aurora, actually. But if you live in a gated community outside of San Bernardino, you don't give a shit. Like, your interaction with these people would be like, oh, the nanny is so nice. Like, there's no gangs going to break into your gated community defended by 25 guys and rob your home. So, I mean, until that starts happening, I think a lot of this will be pretty popular. One reason, actually, that this became less popular in the big blue cities is that in San Francisco and Chicago and so on, everyone lives pretty near downtown.
Right.
So there's just no way to get away from it. I mean, if you had, like, squatter camps in the city, and they did in San Francisco, like, tents in the Mission District, that people started realizing, oh, hey, like, if we have a policy that allows public drug use, this is what you get. You get all these junkies, like, living on the steps of City Hall. But I don't know if that'll happen nationally.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was I wanted to lead to the final group of people I wanted to talk about, and you just, dropped it right in my lap. And that's these wealthy elites. So it's funny, it's weird how those groups of people you two were just talking about, right? They have a different mindset. I agree with everything you both said, but how they're taken in the different communities seems a little different. So I know everybody gets mocked by some groups of people, but those people who have that mindset that happen to be Black are far more accepted, I believe, than the people who have that mindset who aren't, right? Like a friend of the show, Batia, was just on Bill Maher's Real Time the other day, and I watched it, and it was very painful to watch. Not because I don't agree with them politically or anything like that. When they get to the table, Batia's big thing is populism, whether you like it or not. She's very liberal, but she cares about the working class and the common man, and she thinks the elites on both sides are hurting them. And she says that Trump's appeal, yes, he's an elite, but his appeal is he gets that those people are frustrated and being frozen out, and he talks to them. She was on with Tim Ryan and former congressman and Bill Maher, and they looked at her like she had two heads. Like, they're like, what do you mean? They're like, what are you talking about? They did not, like, she would say, those people aren't turning away from Biden because of his solidarity with Israel. They don't like what's going on with the economy. One of them said the economy is great, and the other one literally said they're just not smart enough to know that things are better. So this is what he's saying to them. And people mock them for it. But if you're Black and you say those things, if you listen to Michael Eric Dyson, anyone on MSNBC, Kamala Harris, and things of that nature, they'll say similar stuff and won't get the same pushback. People will say, yeah, in fact, they're excited for them because they're a shining example, ironically, of the success that a black man can have in this very racist country, right? Everything is stacked up against them, but that black girl Magic won it all out and she's still able to do X, Y, Z. But then when they talk, because they're so far removed from normal people, they sound like the white elite, but they don't get treated the same way. Now it's starting to a little bit, but on a larger scale, I still think most blacks are totally happy and celebratory of all the blacks who are very successful and wealthy, even though they have nothing really positive to say about the working class. Do you all agree? And what do you think about that phenomenon?
You know, I go back to the Bob Marley movie. And
Jamaicans. In the immortal words of Bob.
I go back to it, and the reason why I go back to it because when I was growing up as a kid, the electricity and the telephone was cut off right before the community that I lived in. I didn't know why. We had standpipe. I used to have to make buckets, quarter mile, sometimes 20 trips a day to fill drums and feed cows. And I used to just wonder why, why were things this way? But 2 or 3 miles down the road, they had telephone, and then it starts over in the next city where they have telephone picks up and they have certain amenities. And I didn't understand at the time it was the politics that was playing out in real time. And it goes back to that idea is that these people, we cannot separate them because of the melanin, because again, genetically, we are 99.9% similar genetically. We just, the melanin content is what, 0.0012% or something like that. That's what separates, that's a degree of separation from each individual in terms of the picture you see. But the dividing line is here, the head and the heart. That's it. What's in the heart and what's in the head. That's a dividing line. So in Jamaica, you saw two political factions. One was capitalistic, more pro-capitalistic, and the other one was pro-communist. But they were all the same people. It was 90-something% ethnically black people. And this is what, but even the guys who were, one of the prime ministers is Syrian descent, even with that intermingling and all these inter-ethnic relationship, they identify as one group of people. And the mistake we're making is to separate them. They're not separate because the ideology behind them is the very same thing. And that's why I don't like to walk that line as to this person is white, this person is black. No, the ideology, because that ideology is what created this system that I grew up into. Even though in the 1960s, Jamaica was on the same trajectory to have this the same GDP per capita as America and also as Singapore. That was a trajectory it was on when it first gained its independence. But because of those people that all look alike and look and sound in the same way, people just dismiss that as, and that was that was threatening to destabilize the Caribbean because Cuba was already communists. Grenada was starting to move in that direction. Jamaica is pretty much a center of the Caribbean in a lot of ways in terms of the large islands. And if it had fallen to communism, well, I probably wouldn't be here. And people miss those little things because guess what? Again, it's just like Rwanda. It's just black people, one group of black people killing each other. And you know what? We can write all about it and forget all about it. But we need to look at those things. Those people, when I look back now, I see the same forces. And the people who are going to get hurt are probably our great-grandkids, our grandkids, our kids. If we don't deal with these people as the same, what's working through them is coming through their heart and through their mouths.
Will, what are your thoughts about why the black elite are more accepted and they ignore that they're not really? You're on mute, by the way.
Okay, so I mean, I think the reason the black elite is more accepted by the black community is that they're black. And I mean, I think this gets into a very important point, actually, which is like, as was just said, there are a lot of distinctions between people, and biological race is actually one of the least important. And I think this is interesting because it's one of the most visible. So it's one that like ordinary, lightly educated people, if you tell them kind of there's an out group, this is how we do things, will seize on first. But when you actually look at what causes tension in big countries And this is something I found out years ago. I was researching whether things the quote unquote alt-right said were accurate. But if you look at things that cause conflict in big countries, like the big one is linguistic differences, where people actually have their own tribe. So you speak a different language, you have a different style of dress, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Next was religion, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and there are a number of other things, property rights. But race wasn't the big dog in the room. And that at that time surprised me. But ever since then, I've just kind of known it. So things that actually matter when it comes to how someone's going to treat you or what ideas they're going to bring to your community, number one probably is ideology. Like I would much rather have, a center right Asian guy, not black or white, just a newly arriving immigrant come to the USA than someone who looked exactly like me but was a communist. I mean, that's just obvious. Like when people say on that kind of mildly racist fringe of the right, like, well, we'd like to see, demographically similar immigration, like more white people. The problem with that, other than that it is racist, is that those white people would come from what are basically socialist countries in Europe. So I don't actually think, as opposed to Jamaicans or something like that, we need more people from France or Norway. I think you have no idea what that actually do to the political system. So ideology is a big one. Religion. I mean, we're traditionally a Christian country. Like, would mass influx of people who, I mean, the obvious joke would be Satan worship, but who believed in something radically different, would that change the country? Well, of course it would. Much more than black or Asian business people, and just so on down the line. So I guess what I'm saying is that there are things that actually matter, but because there are things like class and ideology that people are going to fight very hard to defend for themselves, you often see people distracted with kind of bullshit. And that's because race is the thing people will latch onto. It's one of the easy distractors to use. So, like, the rich man is looting the country and shipping our jobs to Malaysia, which is what happened. I mean, it was a combined Clinton Gingrich move, 1994, and NAFTA, and then the overseas ASEAN trade bills, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, an easy deflector is like, but look at all these legal immigrants or something like that. Or, what about black crime? And those to me are both real issues, but a much bigger issue and a cause of a lot of the crime is, hey, we took your job and we moved it to Moldova. So that's what you see happen. That people wave the bright big flag over here to distract you from the fact that they're actually very fiscally stable over here. And a lot of issues strike me this way. Like, are there porn books in the high schools? Like, if there are, I say get them out. But like, how much money has been poured into that issue and by who?
Right. No, no, I agree. I think that's enough on that. I want to throw one line. I want to end on something that's not the topic that we've been doing because we do this weekly. So sometimes you move through news cycles and it'll be something else different. I want to get your thoughts, both of you, on the National Guard in the subway in New York. The fact that that the mayor is screaming that crime is going down and the mayor dropped 750 National Guard and 250 state troopers in the subway system yesterday. Announced it, and in 2 hours they were there. I got on the subway. I'm like, wait, they were serious. It wasn't a plan. They're here.
Yeah, like I'll
Picking
respond first.
bags.
Last word to you and the guest. But like, I think that, I mean, this is an example of why it's actually important that we not adopt stupid ass policy solutions from the left. Like, I mean, it's really like, it's funny, but very often when people try to do something that's idealistic, but obviously moronic, the results are so bad that you end up having to do something hard body that's worse than anything that was considered before. And this is a clear example of that. I mean, so New York is one of those states, Hochul, where you're talking about almost defunding the police. NYPD budget's cut by $1 billion. Charles, you might correct that. Stops go down 17%. The subways, you're starting to see guys writing graffiti on the walls again, all that. And so because you allowed this, because you jumped crime by 20% in a year, whatever the exact figure was, you now have to do something crazy. So you put 1,000 soldiers in the subway walking around with the machine pistols like this is Italy. I mean, so it's unfortunate, but that's what you need to do to get crime back down. What, as a competent kind of center right leader, what you would do is never let crime go up in the first place. Just to grab them if they jump the turnstile. So you don't have the guy with the automatic rifle walking around or semi-automatic. But if it's a choice between those two things, the guy with, the gun is a lot better than just bandits running through the station. So,
well, I want to know what you think too, Claston, but I want to say one thing about what he said because everything he said is true, but it's funny. One final point. crime got worse. Obviously, everybody saw that because that made the headlines. But the things that stays local, because they talk about it always local, but no one is not sexy enough. But it is funny. You know what really hurt the MTA? Turnstile jumping. Because it used to be common for the broken windows thing. Like, you want to stop turnstile jumping, not really for the money, because those are the people that are more likely to do all the other things, right? And the left and right would debate that. Well, it was a shift, because I personally saw it. The turnstile jumpers now are like, the banker bros and the financial district guys and regular people. They would just open the door and then everybody will walk through. Nobody's paying fair. So the national news is crying, but the local news is like, the MTA said they lost $1 billion this year strictly to people averting fair aversion, $1 billion. Right? This is crazy, right? So you get the people just get on the bus. So they got the tap thing so you can get on the bus. You don't get on the bus in the front anymore. Get on the bus in the back. So people just get on. No one taps, right? So part of the side note is like, we can do that, and probably we can get to, because all I saw on the news when they put them down there, that was the story. But I saw them stopping people and making them go back and tap. So even though it's supposed to be for the crime, that was this kind of a humorous side. But to that, Will was a little nicer to it, because he's like, because they let it go, he's right. Because they let it go, they had to take extreme measures. But I mean, let's be real. I'm a law and order guy, crazy right winger who think law and order is important. But this ain't gonna do shit. What are you checking bags because the homeless guys carrying a backpack? What are you talking about? I mean, the people who are pushing you on the train, you know what they're carrying? Their foot. I mean, when they pushed you on the track, they're not carrying anything. And when they got to that, you're gonna catch some people, of course. But a lot of the violent things that are happening is people who are sleeping in the station. They're not removing them, right? I mean, kudos to Eric Adams. He doesn't allow you to sleep on the train anymore, but you can sleep train adjacent, right? So if you're on the other side of the turnstile lying there and you just get up, somebody wake you up and you just attack a guy. Like recently we had people punch the conductor, the guy who sticks his head out, they punched him, right? But what is checking bags going to do with that? I mean, so I get the sentiment. I know they want to make people feel safe, but really they're doing it to visually, because they make people feel safe, and to get some more fair. They're not doing it to stop any crime. Claston, what do you think?
Well, the left, I don't trust anything with the left, and with me,
Republicans are mean.
Well, my worldview is 100% Christian. When I look at the world, and there's a scripture in the Bible, because there's some, one of the things, truth sometimes is divorced from our religious belief, but it says, when evil walks about the land, the righteous groans. People who do right, are living in fear. And that's what happened in New York. They're evil. And that's why sometimes I like to, it sounds cliche, it sounds dry, and it sounds far right and extreme, but evil has been elevated in position of power in New York. And because of that, this is the result. And like you said, and Wilfred, he said something I agree with, but like you said, it's not going to fix anything, because the left is not in the business of fixing their wrong. They first have to deal with themselves. And that means you have to self-reflect. And they're not going to do that, because what they're doing, they believe they're right. But their objective reality, there's objective truth, whether we like to it or ascribe to it. You can jump in front of that moving train doing 60 miles an hour and see what happened. They're just objective reality to what we're witnessing. You have to punish criminal, not because you're sending a message, but because the role of the government is a negative role. Most people don't realize that government is not designed to be a positive force. It's supposed to punish bad people. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how I look at that.
Well, I think we we can leave it there, and I will say that we have to have you back to talk about some other things. You like politics? We can be more political, and maybe give us a review on that Bob Marley movie. He is Claston Bernard, Olympian, Jamaican Olympian, Black-ish American, and author of Outcast. Claston, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. It's always. Wilfred, finally do it. I got to be on the same stage with you. Hey, it's a pleasure.
Great to meet you.
God bless the US of A, land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to save, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.